Welcome to the Tevora Talks InfoSec podcast and daily news, brought to you by Tevora. Welcome to another episode of Tevora Talks. I am your host, Cash, and as always with my co-host, Matt Mosley. How's it going, Matt?
Good. Very excited today.
Yeah, today we are very excited. We have a very interesting and important topic that we're going to be talking about, abuse through technology. And to help shed some light on that subject, we have a very special guest today. He is the co-founder of NTAB, the formal legal and tech director of Laura's House. He's on the Policy Advisory Council for California Partnership to End Domestic Violence. He has co-authored the Empowered Women's Guide to Divorce and has contributed to many magazines such as New York Times, Wall Street Journal, LA Times, and more. And to top it all off, he's a family law attorney. So without further ado, Adam Dodge, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming and joining us. How's it going?
It's going well. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Definitely. Thanks for being here with us.
Very much looking forward to talking about seeing where this conversation goes and talking about all these, really important issues and excited to hear about your insights on this stuff as well.
My man.
Yeah, I mean, I was going over your list of accomplishments, and honestly, I think I left out about 50% of the stuff, right?
Easily.
Easily 50%. You've been an advocate for abuse through technology and protecting people that are going through that for a long time. I've been fortunate enough to help out some cases at Laura's House, and you've been working with them and used to work for them for a long time. And I mean, shed some light on the subject. I mean, abuse through technology, it's something that people, you hear about, bullying and whatnot, but it really extends beyond that, right? It's not just surface level things. It can really affect people. And I don't think it's on the top of everybody's mind all the time. But from your experience in the field, how does it really affect people? What really gravitated you towards it? And I mean, let's kind of just start there, I guess.
Sure. So I, at Laura's House, spent a lot of time helping victims of gender-based violence and domestic violence and sexual violence live lives free of abuse. And that was often done through the obtaining of domestic violence restraining orders or restraining orders to protect them. And what we started to see at Laura's House, we were processing around 1,200 restraining order cases a year.
Whoa.
And in the data there, you start to see that in almost every case, technology was showing up. Technology being misused or weaponized was becoming pretty much ubiquitous in every case we were seeing. And I'm not saying that it was location tracking or unauthorized access into somebody's online accounts, but text messages, social media, direct messages, things. I mean, people were always experiencing abuse of some form via their technology or it was happening online. And what I then realized is if somebody came in and said, hey, I've been physically assaulted and I need a place to stay and I need a restraining order and I'm having a lot of emotional trauma and I need some therapy. Laura's House had answers for all that stuff. But as soon as they would say, and I think that I'm being followed, that someone's tracking my location and I think they're monitoring my text messages and they got into my social media account somehow and I don't know how, that's where we would we'd have a really tough time assisting with that because we just didn't have the tools or the resources, which is how we got involved with Tevora in the first place. Actually, when I started working with Matt to come in and do trainings at Laura's House to sort of bridge the gap between our expertise in helping victims of crime and victims of violence and Tevora and Matt's expertise in incident response and cybersecurity and infosecurity and all that good stuff and sort of blending those two things together. And that was just sort of like, that was the big aha moment where we realized that, yeah, we need to be overlapping our respective areas of focus so that we can help the victims of today.
Yeah, that was really not only a fulfilling experience, but definitely took me down a couple paths I didn't expect to go, as far as like researching and finding different ways that people use technology to track people, right? And we know all the common stuff like cell phones and stuff like that, but using those little like tile keychains and those cube things and hiding them like in baby seats so that they could track like where their spouse was going with the children and stuff like that. That was just crazy to me. Like
That is crazy.
steps that people would go to take advantage of how technology was not intended for, but using it in ways to basically just track movements. That was crazy. So I definitely appreciate Adam bringing me into that. I was like I said, taken back by it all, but definitely a worthwhile experience. And now knowing that, I've definitely spread the word and evangelized to all my friends and family about just different capabilities and stuff like that. So, and as always, Adam, I'm available anytime you need me to help out on stuff like that. I love that stuff. So
Yeah, man, I love collaborating with you. And the tile is a great example because that's what and a lot of the trainings that I do for victim service providers, I try to explain that, look, this is not evil technology. It's technology that's meant to make our lives more convenient and make things easy for us. And the tile is a perfect example of how somebody could misuse what is really supposed to be beneficial technology, and then also is a great example of how the order of magnitude of harm really expands with internet connected devices or IoT. Because a tile, if I put a tile in a baby seat and my partner or my wife or whoever drives off, it's a Bluetooth connected device. So once it gets beyond Bluetooth range, 30, 50 feet maybe, I can't track them anymore. But because there are millions of tiles out there, they create a network. And whenever a tile is within the range of another tile, it pings the network. So you can actually geolocate somebody and actually tap into this sort of national or international surveillance network that goes well beyond Bluetooth range to locate somebody. So these are, and
That's
that's
incredible.
that the entry point for that is what, $20 for a tile, and then you have access to a national tracking network. It's pretty stunning what people can do when they want to take well-meaning technology and misuse it, which is why we're always really harping on tech companies to think about how their technologies can be misused and bake in safety protocols and sort of ethical guidelines when they're in the R&D stage.
Yeah, totally. And I'm looking at the tile. It's really small. I mean, they have multiple versions. There's a thin one that's about the size of a credit card. Shove it in your wallet. The rest of them, they're like size of a quarter. So for somebody that wants to really misuse it, they could really hide that anywhere, right?
yep.
And how the heck are you going to find out? How would you be aware that such a thing is hidden under the floor mat of your car? Who's going to look there ever, right? So,
Well, there's actually, so we start to, what a lot of agencies will do with survivors or victims of domestic violence or gender-based violence is what we call safety planning, where we plan with them to keep themselves safe moving forward. And usually it's been very, traditionally focused and not very tech savvy, but we've started to, or I've actually really tried to encourage folks in the victim services field to start incorporating some tech savvy measures when they're safety planning with clients. And to your point, Cash, it's with that, we're always telling clients, or I'm always encouraging professionals to tell their clients, hey, turn on your Bluetooth and see what devices your phone tries to pair with when you're in your car. And if a tile shows up, maybe drive a couple blocks to make sure you're not picking up a tile in the area. But if it keeps showing up in your car consistently, that's a really great way to determine whether or not there's an unauthorized tile in your car.
oh, that is a great strategy. I was thinking about that. I'm like, what would you do? Would you like kind of get like a metal detector scanner and I don't know, sweep the whole car? But that wouldn't work. But that's a good point.
Yeah,
That's a
that's
great
a good
way to
one.
figure out.
Another good one, and this is a hat tip to Matt, is the Fing app, Fing. That's a great app to help victims who are worried that that there's might be a listening device or a camera in their home. It tells you every device that's connected to the Wi-Fi in the home, and so we've been able to use that as a safety planning tool as well. So it's nice to be able to use technology in a positive way as opposed to always playing defense. And the Thing app is really helpful in that regard.
Yeah, definitely. And for those listening, if you're ever staying in Airbnb and you hop on their Wi-Fi, definitely be sure to check out the Fing app for anything that might be spying on you as well.
Yeah, that's how whenever I bring it up in training, I say, the head of incident response at a large cybersecurity firm, anytime he stays at an Airbnb, he uses this app to see
For
what's
sure.
to sort of give credibility to my to what I'm saying. So I use you all the time, Matt. Without your consent, I'm dropping your name all the time.
Thank you. Yeah, it's and I think when we were putting together the training, how long ago was that, Adam? Like 2-3 years ago?
Yeah, over 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
At this point.
Just going down kind of the rabbit hole and figuring out all the different ways that people use technology to spy on, just tracking movements. Not even we're not even into the social media aspect of it yet, but just tracking movements was pretty crazy. In fact, I had actually read during my research that some people had actually wired a cell phone, hardwired it to the battery inside the engine compartment, and hid the cell phone. They just taped it on or tacked it onto the side of the engine or whatever they could find, and they were using the cell phone as a GPS location. Just
That's
find my
crazy.
iPhone or find my Android or whatever the thing is for Android, and then tracking the cars that way. So yeah, it's just, once you open that Pandora's box, I guess, there's so many ways and so many methods. And I don't know if Adam, you ever came up with kind of a methodology for going through, but I started working on one, just trying to kind of all the check boxes to go through. Is there something that you have for that, to kind of go through a vehicle to check for any kind of technology that's been added without your knowledge?
It's really tough. Here's the big reveal when it comes to what I call technology enabled abuse or technology enabled domestic violence, that I think was maybe surprising for folks that have expertise like yourselves in cybersecurity, is more often than not, and I would say maybe in the overwhelming majority of circumstances, the perpetrator or the person causing the abuse is not an expert in anything related to tech, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not savvy, they're not doing, and when we do get somebody who's, works in cybersecurity or IT, that's where we call Tevora, because then it levels up and we really need expert versus expert at that point. But when it's just somebody who is a non-expert but has used opportunity because they're in a relationship with this person that they're targeting, or we're in a relationship with them and that they had access to their vehicle and to their devices and to their accounts and their personal information, they're not hacking anything. They're just using, I think hackers would be offended by calling a lot of what these folks do is hacking, because they, if my girlfriend logged into her Amazon account and on my laptop and saved the password, and then I go on to Amazon after she leaves and it's saved and I just log in using her credentials. That's really like giving somebody the keys to the front door of your house. It's not. So to your point, the first things that we do so the answer to the question, Matt, is yes, we do. I do have some checklist stuff with the idea that we're dealing with somebody who's not maybe a sophisticated perpetrator. So the first thing we do, as we talked about earlier, is we try to pair with a Bluetooth device that we don't recognize to see if any are in the car. The other thing we do is we check the data port underneath the driver's side wheel, because almost every car now has a data port under there that when you take your car in for service, they'll tap into that to get into your car's computer to run diagnostics. Well, you can go to any like Radio Shack or Best Buy, and you can get a device that you can plug in there that will give you all that data for your car. But it will also work as a tracking device. It'll also can monitor Bluetooth calls. It can give you a variety of different data, which, again, not evil tech, designed to give you information about your car, but something that somebody can easily plug in and then remote access into to get information about the person driving the car.
Yeah,
So,
and it looks like it's a part of the car, right?
and it looks like it's part of the car.
Yep.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm. So we look in those spots as well. And Matt, I have worked on cases where somebody's hardwired a phone into the battery of a car in the trunk, which is like, and one of the cases I worked on, it was actually the dude's phone that he had wired in there. So when she took it to law enforcement, it was his phone. So it was really easy to prove who it was. But
well, that's good at least.
yeah. So we'll do the obvious stuff first, and then if it's really the reality is it's usually not the car, it's usually the person's device that they're being followed. It's usually the simplest solution. But those are the two areas we look. And then if you talk to any there's a website called Spy Guy, and I talked to their founder not too long ago about this stuff. And I mean, if you want to get under the car, I mean, it's usually a tracking device is not going to be difficult to locate or see if you get under the car. It's usually in a pretty conspicuous spot. But even he said, you're unlikely to see super sophisticated spy tools being used for this, because they've got to tap into power and they've got to do all these different things. And so we usually keep it simple. We look around in the car, we try to pair, and we look in that data port, and then we obviously secure their devices and their phone to make sure that that's not the cause of the problem.
Yeah, I'm on that site right now for Spy Guy. They have, I mean, great technology for anybody out there. I think everybody should kind of at least get some of this stuff, because you never really know when you're being watched, right? And just like you said, Matt, Adam, Airbnb, right? Everybody goes, how do you know if there's a camera there? How do you know if there's a tracker in your car? How do you know if there's a tracker, shoved in someone's purse in the zip lining? But I think, the ones that I've worked on recently with Laura's house, it's interesting. They don't even have to use any external technology to really cause paranoia or to really track somebody. From the experiences I've had, especially when you're in a relationship with somebody, marriage and whatnot, it's very common to share accounts, or I know your account information and password and vice versa. And through the just standards nowadays with, iTunes and iTunes accounts, iCloud. Hey, as long as I know someone's iCloud email, I can really easily tap in, find out what they're talking about, find out where they are, find out the pictures that they've been taking. And through those, there's all geolocation tags. And back to kind of Matt, what you were saying is just the web in general, social media.
Yeah, I mean, the one of the things, I just did a training for a bunch of folks in Texas yesterday, and like, to your point, Cash, like, we're so plugged in. I think people fail to recognize how plugged into their technology they actually are. And so I try to frame it in a way that opens people's minds a little bit to this, because I ask, like, hey, what's the first thing that we do when we wake up in the morning? For most of us, it's we get on our phones, right? Like, and that starts a cycle for the rest of the day where we are plugged into technology for the rest of the day.
Yeah,
and it's often the last thing we do at night. And technology, our devices, and social media and online, it's how we work, it's how we get from point A to point B, it's how we shop, it's how we listen to music, it's how we watch entertainment, it's how we bank, it's how we connect with our communities, it's how we meditate, it's how I mean, the list goes on. So if you really start to think about it, I would argue our lives are more more online than offline these days.
Oh, definitely.
Right? So it makes sense that, if you want to harm somebody, you want to harm them where they're spending a lot of their time, which right now is online, and you want to go after things that are important to them or are valuable to them. And so their social media accounts, really valuable. It's especially now, if you were able to get into somebody's social media account and make them feel unsafe on social media to the point where they had to stop going on there, that is a form of isolation that is really abusive, and really detrimental to somebody's mental health. And some folks might think, social media, what's the big deal? But if you can't connect with your community and you're a victim of abuse, an isolated victim is a vulnerable victim. So, and I know, Matt, you have a lot of experience with social engineering and those sorts of things. And I think that's something I talk about a lot in my trainings too. So I'm ripping you off again, but it's I don't think we realize how much time we spend on social media and how easy it is for, Cash, to your point about all the sharing of accounts and devices that we do, that we sort of normalize with our partners or friends or family members. It really can give somebody access to things that are integral to our lives, and if manipulated or monitored, or if we get locked out from them, it kind of turns our lives upside down.
Yeah, I would argue that anybody listening that doesn't think that's a big deal, like, oh, social media is a big deal. Think about right now being at home. We're all at stay-at-home orders, right? COVID-19. Try living your life and staying connected with your family, right? You can make a phone call, but you're not going to phone call all 254 of your Facebook friends or whatever you've got, right? So just to put yourself in their shoes, of someone who can't use social media, especially in a time like right now, just to kind of give you an idea of how detrimental that might be. So I don't know. I think it is important that Adam brought that up, and please don't downplay that to say, oh, it's just social media, no big deal. So
yeah, it's
totally.
nuts. It's nuts.
Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
No, and I was just gonna, another thing that I realize as we're talking, I've realized how much like Matt has influenced what I do. But did either of you follow that story? Maybe it was last year, and it got some news coverage. But a woman who had I think she had the Ring security system in her house. Didn't practice good password management, used the same passwords across multiple sites. Anyway, she and her husband were watching TV, and they had a baby, and they thought they heard somebody whispering to their baby in the baby's room. And they went in there and didn't hear anything and thought, okay, well, maybe it was just, picking up another security system or randomly picking something up. And then the next day or a couple days later, she was home alone and she heard somebody talking to her baby again. And then they started talking to her and threatening her and hurling racial slurs at her and all these different things. And so she immediately ran and started like unplugging, all the cameras. And she had what had happened, which will be no, I think, surprise to you two, is that because she practiced poor password management, one of her passwords and email addresses were part of a data breach, and that it got resold or accessed by somebody, and they were able to just log into her Ring security system using that email and password, and had been monitoring her and her child for months. Until they got bored, I think, and decided to start threatening her. So I think
that's really so creepy.
Isn't that super creepy? So I'm always telling people to go to Have I Been Pwned, which I also got from you, Matt, as a sort of a way to really push the idea of, hey, you need to like really start thinking about not using the same passwords across, because I think we're a bit lazy when it comes to that stuff, and we just I'll just type in the same password because I think the average person has 90 online accounts and 80 apps, so who's going to remember 170 different apps and passwords? But it's like when you start to think how somebody could ruin your life if they get access, it's the urgency becomes a lot more real when thinking about password security and password management and all that good stuff. So I don't know what you guys think about that.
Shout out to our sponsors. No, we don't have sponsors, but definitely recommend LastPass or KeePass for stuff like that. For anybody listening. That is, so password reuse is a huge thing. Obviously, like in that example that you just gave, but we get called into incidents all the time. In fact, we just had one over the weekend where they couldn't figure out how this person's email got compromised. And turns out that, I mean, what, based on all evidence that we have, is that what most likely happened was it was password reuse. So their password got dropped in some, recent data breach, and then they just kind of sprayed the password against Office 365 and gained access. And that's from the business side. But from the personal side, I mean, if it's something that's not important to me, I don't really use strong passwords, and I'm a security expert. Right? Like, now with that said, if I have, like, and Adam knows this from previous conversations and training and stuff like that, but like for Facebook and Gmail and all that stuff, like I don't even know what the password is because of LastPass. It generates this huge string of random characters and then saves it for me, and then I don't need to worry about ever remembering it. So highly recommend that for anybody listening.
Yeah,
What?
passwords, man.
Yeah.
Like it's
I'm
crazy. Yeah,
I'm
sorry,
so
go.
fascinated. Sorry, I keep interrupting you, but I actually want to ask you guys a question. I'm really, and Cash, you alluded to this earlier, but I'm really fascinated by coming from the field that you come from, and your level of expertise in cybersecurity and incident response, and then jumping into this world of domestic violence and sort of figuring out how you can leverage your expertise to help victims or help people who help victims. I'd love to hear a little bit more about like what, like, because, and Cash, you talked about this a little bit about how it surprised you were that people were using maybe really simple techniques to upend somebody's life. But I mean, do you have any other impressions about what this sort of online or this tech enabled domestic violence world looks like, and what surprised you about it? And I'm also always fascinated to hear sort of what your take is on how folks can make themselves safer.
Yeah, I mean, like, Matt can definitely chime in on this. It doesn't matter if it's a personal case or if it's a corporation that gets brought down like completely. The root of everything really is an email. And, generally speaking, we don't really think about it, but all of us have, dummy emails that we send all our junk stuff to. But there's that one email account that is linked to everything we do, our banks, our social medias, and whatnot. And all that really is necessary is, hey, if I want to get into your bank account, if I hit forgot my password, what does that typically do? It says, hey, we sent an email to your email to reset your password. Very simple. So if I have your access to your email account, I can really gain access to every single one of your accounts if I wanted to. I can go into your bank, send myself some money after the fact. I can change your password for every other your accounts. I can change your password to your main email account. So the biggest thing is, hey, secure that email, really figure out what's pointing to it. When I sit down with,
Two factor.
yeah, enable two factor. It's crazy. Every single one of these apps, they have two factor. And I was actually thinking about it the other night. I don't know why it's not mandatory when you sign up for an app that says, hey, in order to continue, you must enable two factor. It's like hidden in a submenu of a submenu of a
Yeah.
submenu. And you kind of have to be an expert to figure out where the heck two
They're
factor
starting to make
is.
it required, right? Like I just read yesterday, Nest is requiring people to do two factor, and Ring, after that incident that Adam was talking about, required two factor because of the.
Apple does too. You don't
Oh,
you
okay.
like your iPhone, if you have the most updated iOS, you can't do, there's no security reset questions anymore.
Perfect.
That's perfect. Yeah, I think all of them have to do it. Banks. I don't know why banks aren't hopping on that bandwagon where it's like, okay, you have an online account, let's secure your money and do two factor.
Yeah.
So, that's a big thing because no
Yeah.
matter if somebody has your password, let's say it gets hacked, fine. What are they going to do? They can't two factor. They can't really bypass two factor. I'm sure of course, there's always ways,
There's
right,
ways,
Matt?
but the planets have to align. It's like,
Yeah.
it's super complicated.
It's super complicated. And, first thing I typically do when I sit down with somebody, I say, hey, write me a list of all your email accounts. And then we'll start at the top. I say, what's your main email account? And I say, let's branch out from there. Let's make a tree. That's the root node. What's pointing to this email account? will write down a list of those accounts. And then they start really seeing, oh my God, if this email account gets hacked, it could really ruin my life. And yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing that I have been able to at least figure a way is let's start cleaning up your emails. Let's
Yeah.
make sure they don't point to each other. People say, oh, when you set up an email account, it says, what's your backup email? And then that'll point to something else. And then it says, what's the backup email for that? And then the chain can go on and on. So you could definitely bypass stuff, but at some point you have to make sure it's as secure as possible. Get your passwords in order, get two-factor on.
Right. And
And
it's not rocket science, right? I mean, I don't mean to say that like dismissively of folks, but what you're talking about, those steps, if people take those steps, you don't have to be an expert to take those steps, right? And they can make you so much safer from attacks moving forward. But
oh yeah.
I can tell you, working with as many people and doing as many people aren't even, they like know what it is. Most folks everybody knows what a password is, and most folks know what two-factor is. But the idea that they're updating those passwords, using password managers, making sure two-factor is on is pretty low. Although I will say, victims of domestic violence, two-factor authentication is unfortunately can be rather easily circumvented by an intimate partner who wants to harm you because in a variety of ways. One, they're like, Cash, I think you just mentioned this, but like they can go in and they can change the contact information on certain accounts that security emails or security SMS are going to the perpetrator's device, which I've seen, or two-factor, they have access to the device, or two-factor just isn't getting triggered because the person logging in is logging in from a trusted device.
Yep.
And has the password because they live with the person or the person has used their device in the past. And so the person that wants to like the example I gave with, hey, she logged into her Amazon on my laptop and saved the password. And now my laptop is now I know the password and I'm using a trusted device as far as Amazon's concerned.
Yep.
So there's this sort of huge security loophole
and people don't know to not do the trusted device thing. Like they want that convenience, right? For me with LastPass, I don't even set that for even my personal devices. I don't set this is a trusted device because of my knowledge of the industry. But I would say, without having an exact number, I would say the majority of people probably do that. Trust this device for 30 days or whatnot. So
that's great advice.
But to go back real
Yeah.
quick, just to give a real life example. So 6 or 7 years ago, we had a pretty large West Coast financial institution hire us to do a pen test. So we were hacking into the company, and the CFO at the time, I forget how we did it now because it's been so long, but I know that we identified his personal email, which was a Gmail account, and then he had the password reset questions, and his social media had every single question available just on his Facebook profile: who his wife was, what their anniversary date was, where they were married, who his father was, his mother was. He had pictures of their gravestones with his mother's maiden name, her birth date, her death date. Same for his father and his brother. And we used this information to gain access to his Gmail account. And then once we were in the Gmail account, we were able to look through and we just searched for passwords, right? So any email that had passwords, and then we identified, I think, 2 or 3 passwords, and then we were able to gain access to the company using his personal email to get into his work email, and then from there we were the CFO for a day. So now we had permission to go after his personal stuff. He had granted us that special permission for this. So with that said, but yeah, so just to give you an example of how we do things in the security field and how that would apply to a personal life, right? So can you imagine, I want to take someone down or make their life miserable, gain access to their personal account. Now I've got access to their bank account. I can do all kinds of things, right? And it's just, yeah, enable two-factor. Don't use password reset questions if possible, or if you do password reset questions, make them something that's a little hard to. If it says who's your best friend growing up, I don't know. try and figure out something that's not an exact answer, but not something that's super random like yellow bus, because you probably won't remember that. So
You guys see a lot of spyware on devices and computers or malware and stuff like that?
we see a lot of malware, spyware. Not so much.
Yeah, not as
So
much.
yeah, when we do the incidents, there will be a form of spyware, right? Because the attackers are going to try and get credentials. So we haven't, man, I haven't seen a keylogger in a long time. I'm sure people still use them, but typically what happens is they'll drop a tool on the box that'll allow them to get the credentials. But yeah, there's been other instances where people have copied browsing history to see what kind of websites were accessed, what kind of credentials they used, and stuff like that. So
I feel like everybody's always jumping to like the most extreme, if a survivor is being tracked or whatever, they are jumping to the extremes of, hey, there's spyware on my phone, or there's there's malware or spyware on my laptop now. And I don't know, I get the feeling that in my experience, that's exceedingly rare. But if somebody comes to you and says, oh, I think there's spyware on my device, like what is your reaction to that? If they say, oh, I think there's spyware on my iPhone or
take a
Android.
flamethrower and burn it.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the only thing that I can see as eliminating it, and it may not even eliminate it depending on the level of how in depth it is, but wiping and reinstalling from a factory reset,
Yeah.
probably the number
I
one
agree.
way. If it's beyond that, I don't know. You'd probably have to buy a new phone, and unfortunately, I think a lot of people can't really swing that. So
And why can you because this I get asked this question all the time, because people are like, well, can I just wipe my phone? Like, I think there's spyware on there, or I know he's watching me, or I know she's watching me somehow. I can't afford, like you said, Matt, I can't afford a new phone. I want to can I just factory reset it? Why is it that that's not a foolproof? Why is it, like, what would you say to a victim if they were thinking of doing that, like setting their expectations about how safe they'll be moving forward, and how likely it is that will solve the problem?
sure. So Apple and Android both work on their respective operating systems, and within those operating systems, they basically launch this environment that we see, right, with all the apps and games and stuff like that, and that's running as, let's just say, for lack of a better term, the standard user. Well, there's also an admin user that has full access to the entire phone, right? That can run system commands and everything under that layer that we see on the front with the apps and games. So when you root your phone or you jailbreak your phone, you're now tapping into that underlying layer, and in that layer, you can hide other software that won't get caught up in a reset, or yeah, if you were to reset, it would just basically reset that top layer, but that underlying layer is still going to be affected with whatever got installed there. So that's why the factory wipe and reset stuff is probably the best bet, just to completely format the phone and take it back to day one, to ground zero, so you can wipe out all those other layers.
Mm.
And then, as far as like, but people do, when they do those resets, then they'll back everything up to the cloud. Is there a risk that when they do that, and then reinstall their backups, that they're just reinstalling the spyware?
I would have to look into that personally. I don't know off the top of my head, but I would think that backup would only get that top layer. Like if you're looking at a sandwich, it's only going to get the bread layer. I don't think it gets anything below, the meat and the cheese. If
Yeah,
that makes sense.
these are the questions that people ask me all the time. So
Yeah.
I figure,
But I'm not quite 100% on that. I think Apple does a pretty good job of trying to protect that underlying that last bread layer, just because they've done, just from day one, done a good job of protecting the App Store and everything. Android, I'm not going to say didn't do a good job, but they seem to be more targeted, or the operating system that they have is not as locked down,
Secure.
I guess.
Yeah.
So it seems to have a little bit more holes in it. So the underlying layer there may get caught up in a system backup. I'm not really sure.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, you can download apps from outside the Google Play Store with Android, whereas Apple is very strict about.
Right. You have to have the jailbroken iPhone, which at that point you've already gone underneath that layer, that first layer.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's people, but I don't know. I so appreciate what you guys do and what Tevora does, because it is, I mean, despite, I think it's really challenging for you all to come in from what you do, because the folks in my field are generally not super tech savvy. So I feel like is it pretty challenging for you guys to come in and, I mean, because if you say jailbroken, for example, to if you explain, like, I don't think most folks are going to know what you mean in my
right.
field when you mention that. Have you found when you're working with folks, like when you've worked on a Laura's House case or whatever, do you really have to sort of take a step back and really look, like, come at it from like a very, I don't want to say like elementary level, but have you found that to be challenging, that you have to sort of assume that people don't have a pretty low level of tech savvy when it comes to this stuff?
Yeah, and I think Cash can agree. It just depends on the audience. You always have to know your audience, especially in technology. A lot of people like to use jargon, and I guess I should have clarified exactly what jailbreaking and rooting your phone is, um, but yeah. So we just have to really. I think with Laura's House, we typically always do that. I've heard Cash, when he's working with some of the clients there, that he kind of breaks it down for them in terms that are understandable. When we have our clients for work, they typically know the terms and stuff like that. But the tough part is, I wouldn't say convincing them, but getting them on board with the fact that, yeah, you had this system breached, and we're responding to that system, and yeah, the situation is probably contained with there, but we still need to go through and like if your house was broken into, you see the front door is broken open, and they went in the first room and then they left. So you're probably good to go, right? Like, you assume everyone's gone, no big deal, but you still have to sweep the house, right? You still have to go through the house and make sure that the attacker is gone, and check all the rooms and check all the closets and account for any kind of missing goods. So the same thing applies in computer security when we have an incident. Yeah, they came into that server and then they probably left, but now we still have to check the rest of the environment. And so our
Right.
clients don't typically understand that part, and that's kind of the the tricky part, because now they're, something that should have taken, or not should have, but could have taken 8 hours. It actually requires like 24, 30, 50 hours to go through and just make sure everything's cleaned up. So that's kind of, I think, the more difficult part. So
Yeah.
I
I think
think
Wow.
I
one
got a
thing
little
that I
off
can
topic there, but sorry.
I nerd out on this stuff, so I think that's fascinating, actually.
one thing I can kind of like circle back to your whole point of backing up to the iCloud is what Matt was saying, jailbroken. For the people out there, your phone is usually not jailbroken. If your phone is jailbroken, you intentionally did it yourself, right? So, and the whole reason behind that jailbreaking
Or
was,
someone did it.
yeah, or someone did it, but like you would know. And the whole reason people used to jailbreak stuff was in order to download, expensive apps for free or do different weird things with your phone. So for the standard user out there, your phone is typically not jailbroken. Um, but with that said, still, when you back up things to the iCloud, even if you do a restore, what we do is we use an app. It's called Mobilize, and you don't really even need to have these high level apps. Is what I tell the clients. I sit there with them and I kind of go through every single app. I say, "Do you recognize this app? Yes or no? Do you use it? Yes or no? When's the last time you used it? Delete everything that you really don't know. Then do a backup. Then you can do a restore. That way, when you're doing a restore, it's at least coming back as the most minimal version of what you had. Or delete everything and then start downloading your apps again one by one so that your phone is coming back as clean as humanly possible. So
That's
I
such
think
good.
that's a
That's such good advice. That's such good advice.
I think that's a great way to go about it. And you guys were talking about the trusted devices. Fortunately, again, this is it's menus within submenus. So any app or service that you're signed up with, whether it's Amazon or Gmail, if you do Google search of how do I untrust my devices in Google or how do I untrust devices in Amazon, there's a way. And I was advising some of these clients when I sit with them. In Google, you can go somewhere and says, list of devices that are currently logged in. And you can kind of get a real time view of what devices are currently hooked to this email account. You can log them all out remotely. You can untrust devices and then reset all your passwords so that, hey, there's no way that device can automatically get trusted again. So there are good ways to protect yourselves. But again, you just really got to do your due diligence. It takes time. It's not like a one click and you're done in 10 minutes. It could take a long time sometimes, but
We've got all this downtime in quarantine. It's a perfect time to do it.
oh yeah, it's a perfect time. I mean, get in the habit of checking what devices your account is linked to, as frequently as you can. Make it like a thing. Say, hey, every 2 weeks, I'm just gonna log in and make sure my Amazon is only linked to my 3 laptops or my laptop and my 2 phones and whatnot. So something simple like that could really, save a lot of headache, I think.
What was
Definitely.
that, Cash? What was the name of that app you said you use when you're factory resetting a device? You
When
said,
we're f- when no when we're factory resetting a device for Apple, I just go into the system settings and I do a reset. Or I what I
oh,
could
okay.
tell a client to do on Apple devices. Apple's actually very friendly with these kind of things. I just say, hey, you can even take it into Apple and say, this is my situation. Can you completely reset this device for me? And then they'll plug it into their systems and whatnot. Like Matt said, Android is a little bit of a different beast, right? Because the advantage of Apple devices is they've built their system in a way where they can do a single update and it'll push to all the devices. So they're able to manage these updates really well. And that's why they're a little bit more secure. Android, on the other hand, because there are so many different kinds of Android phones, it's hard for them to centralize one single update that'll update to every single kind of phone. There's so many different manufacturers, so many different models. That's why they're usually a little bit more susceptible to shady activity. I'll put
Yeah.
it that way.
Yeah. But to answer your question, Am, I think Cash had mentioned Mobilize, which is what we use for mobile forensics, and also when we're
Oh, right.
investigating some of these cases that Laura's House has brought us and stuff like that. So, um,
That's so helpful because I get that. I know we've maybe spent maybe it seems like we spent too much time on this, but I can tell you, like, from working in the field with victims and with professionals that work with victims, like, they're always asking about um, like the factory reset option and how
oh
safe
yeah,
it is, and will that solve the issue, and all these things. So I apologize for belaboring this, but I think it's something that folks listening, like, that's just something that's not really out there. I've done some research on it, and so hearing from experts like yourselves about the efficacy of resets on different devices and how to do it is super valuable. I'm very confident that folks listening to this will be able to use that insight to make their devices safer if they feel like they're compromised.
yeah. I mean, I think that's the number one way to do it, unless there's another way that I'm not aware of. But you feel free to make that comment either on our website or email us at podcast@tevora.com or tevoratalks.com. But yeah, I was going to say that that Mobilize, if a corporation or any of the people that you work with, Adam, want to use it, it's pretty good. It was built for law enforcement. It's basically quickly downloads the phone, everything on that phone, and then you can quickly go through and analyze it for malware, spyware, um, photos, geotagging, all that good stuff. So you can really
Wow.
see how much data is available to someone on your phone. But with that said, and technology and all that good stuff, I wanted to mention one more thing. And I know you're a big advocate for this and bringing awareness to this. And I mean, you were talking about this before everyone else was talking about this, because I remember actually hearing about this first from you 3 years ago, was the deep fakes.
Oh yeah.
So can you dive a little bit in on deep fakes and how that's affecting these victims and kind of the shift as a whole for our entire community?
Yeah. So for those who haven't heard of deep fakes before, deep fakes are refer to basically it's an artificial intelligence neural network sort of deep neural network based platform that essentially takes what like a special effects department would have to invest a lot of time to do years ago, and makes it something that any layperson can do for the most part, which is swap somebody's face into a video, onto the person in the video's face, and make it appear that now that person is in the video. So it's kind of a clunky explanation, but an example is taking some photos of Scarlett Johansson and then picking out a porn video, that with let's say a woman that has a similar body type to Scarlett Johansson, and then the deepfake platform can take Scarlett Johansson's image from those photos and then map it onto this woman's face in the video. And when it's complete, it now looks like Scarlett Johansson is participating in the video. And what we found is there's been a huge spike in basically what I'm referring to as non-consensual deepfake pornography, where women are being put into porn videos without their consent,
That's crazy.
and are being sexualized and fetishized. And in fact, there was a report on it last year where there had been at that point, I think 134 million views and counting of these deep fake pornography videos that are all over. In fact, there's niche
Dang.
websites that
I did
just,
not realize it was that rampant.
oh yeah, it's huge. I mean, they're seeing exponential growth on these sites, and it's 98% of all deep fakes are pornographic, and 100% of those target women. So you might see deep fakes in the news talking about, oh, people might use deep fakes to create fake videos to influence the electoral process or subvert democracy or create fake news, but that's not really happening. What is happening and what doesn't get covered enough is this is a violence against women issue. It's incredibly gendered, and it's being weaponized to basically virtually force women to participate in sex acts without their consent. And what you hear from folks is, well, what's the big deal? If people know it's not real, it's just online. But I can tell you, if the example I give all the time is, if like a 16-year-old girl's walking down the hall at her high school, and a bunch of kids are crowded around a phone, and she looks at what they're watching, and it's a deep fake sex tape of her, and everybody watching knows it's fake, and she knows it's fake. But when she walks away, if you believe that she's not going to be affected by that in a negative way, then
Oh yeah,
I would
totally.
disagree with you. We don't really
Totally.
know what, it hasn't been studied enough yet, but we don't really know what that's going to look like. But it could cause post-traumatic stress. It could be used to fuel rumors about her, like, oh yeah, I heard, I know that's not her, but I heard she does stuff like that. I mean, there's
Right.
all these different sort of impacts that, and the tech has gone. In fact, we're seeing cybercrime. I'm sure you guys are going to start dealing with this, where deep, like voice cloning,
Yep.
and those are targeting your corporate clients, and they're taking, for example, in the UK, they took a bunch of audio from the CEO of a company, from earnings calls and TED Talks and all these different things, and then synthesized his voice, and then were able to trigger false wire transfers, by having quote unquote this fake voice of the CEO call folks in the company and telling them to wire money. And I think several $100,000 or several $1 million across different companies have been taken. And I'd be interested in your take on this, because when there's a phishing attack, a phishing scam or something like that, I'm imagining what you guys say is, hey, if you get an email that's telling you to do something from somebody in your agency and it seems a little fishy, like, call that person and verify that they sent that email
Yeah.
to you. But now calling that person, may not be the safest thing to do. You might actually have to, and even if you say, oh, well, just video chat with them, well, that you can make a deep fake or what's called a deep portrait of someone, which is like almost like wearing a mask of that person, like Mission Impossible style. So if I can clone your voice and I can create a deep portrait of you, then I can impersonate you on video, saying, yeah, I sent you that email. Go ahead and click the link. And
Yeah. We're seeing it. I mean, we haven't seen it personally, right? But we've heard about it. And then also just recently, someone came out with deep fakes for Zoom. Now,
yep, I saw
the
that.
execution wasn't great, but that was the first run. It's only going to get better, unfortunately. So,
or worse, I guess. Depends how you look at it.
Yeah.
but I mean, like that person's ability to do a proper deep fake is only going to get better.
Totally.
What do you, I mean, you guys are on the cutting edge of like, I mean, all your clients are vulnerable to these new technology attacks. I mean, do you just kind of keep an eye out for new incidents in like new technology attacks and just keep yourselves informed? And then, I mean, I think about this all the time. Like if law enforcement, if somebody makes a deep fake video or a deep fake phone call saying, hey, I just got this voicemail saying they're going to go shoot up this school. And then that law enforcement officer's got to figure out what they're going to do right away. And they may not even know deep fake cloning or voice cloning exists and just believe it on site. I mean, when something's never happened before, but it's going to be weaponized and used to perpetrate cybercrime or digital attacks. I mean, how do you, and maybe this is a weird question to be asking, but I'm fascinated, like, how do you guys, is it just sort of the same? Like, how do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think in security, at least on our side of it, like defense and offensive, there's always a group of people that are trying to figure out ways to use technology in ways it's not meant to be, and they're doing it for the greater good, right? They're trying to have that attacker mindset so that we can prepare for things we've never seen before. With that said, the attackers always seem to have another way of circumventing things that we had never even thought of before. But it's great to be able to try and put yourself in the attacker's shoes and how they're going to leverage this technology. From the example you gave, and this is just off the top of my head right now, but the only thing I can say is, you have to approach that situation as if it were real, no matter what, right? It's almost like a bomb threat. I'm sure the police department somewhere has gotten a bomb threat and you could hear the person giggling on the other end, but they have to take that threat serious because it's a bomb, right? Like, so what else can you do? And so, yeah, it's unfortunate. I would just plead with the world as a whole, do the right thing. But we all know that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Easier said than done, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm sure it just becomes the new normal, right? It's like, we'll be at a time when digital forgery is just video forgery is just, and impersonation is just the norm. And, you'll have, just like you have to, encourage your clients to use good email practices and two-factor and all that good stuff. They're going to have protocols to verify video chat or voicemail and all that kind of stuff, I guess.
Yeah, there's going to be some sort of footprint or digital signature that you have to put on your voice or your face for Zoom, or abandon that as any kind of form of credibility, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, the future is, it's
nuts.
nuts.
Future's out there. I mean, it's like all about evolution. Everything evolves, viruses evolve, technology evolves, but I think our use of that technology always needs to evolve at the same rate, as fast as possible. I know there's companies out there that are trying to figure out how to detect deep fakes, but at the same time, there's the guys who are making the deep fakes that are maybe 5% faster, or they're a little bit ahead. So it's always like a catch-up game. But I guess at the end of the day use your best judgment, right? If it smells fishy, it probably is, I guess.
Yeah, but,
right.
Is it? Like, we
Is
just
it?
don't know.
Yeah. We just don't know. I mean, like, the faster computers get, the stronger processing power gets. I think deepfakes now, they're obviously a little bit easier to spot, but think about how video games have evolved. PlayStation 1 game from 15 years ago, 20 years ago. If you look at that now, it looks like the choppiest thing in the world. And the games nowadays, they're getting so undetectable. I mean, it looks like real life. So 10 years from now, the Deepfake game, it could really be undetectable
Yeah, plot
to the
thickens.
naked eye, right?
Nice. Well played, sir.
Yeah, no, I
I
think
had
you're
a buddy
right.
who had that sound effect on his phone for any time he got a text message. It was great because it would just come up in like random moments when you're talking. Like, oh, did we just cross a story plot? A plot point?
That's funny.
Anyways. All right. Well, thank you very much, Adam. I'm going to let Cash take us out, but I really appreciate it. As always, I love talking to you. It's great catching up with you because we haven't talked since, gosh, I want to say last year, I think, about this time. So,
Yeah, I know. It's been too long.
yeah. I mean, we've been, I think, kept in touch via Slack and stuff like that, but
Right.
definitely not a phone call. So any other shout outs that you want to make before we go?
No, I don't think so. I mean, folks can find me at endtab.org if they want to reach me. That's where I've got my website. It's got some information on there. And yeah, I think that's it.
And there's a free deepfake guide, by the way, on the main page. So
yes, thank you,
that.
Matt.
Yep.
You're better at plugging this than I am.
But yeah, definitely, Adam, thanks so much for coming out. It was just a great conversation. I hope the people out there that listen to this podcast today can, take something good out of it. Protect yourselves, check on your email accounts, really start thinking, how safe am I? How deeply connected is everything? Like you said, Matt, everybody does good, but always be on the safe side. And with that said, this is a very important topic. If there are any questions that you guys have out there, things that you're just curious of, how do I do this? How do I do that? Am I safe? Am I not? Feel free, send us your questions. We'd be more than happy to reply to you guys. Podcast at tevoratalks.com. And with that said, Adam, again, thanks so much for coming out. We'll hopefully have you back here with us again in the future. Talk about it a little bit more as technology evolves. Matt, it's been real as always. And with that said, stay tuned for our next episodes. You can check us out on Podcast World, iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, social media at Tevora Talks. And till next time, thanks for listening in.
Thanks, everyone.